dear colleague and longtime friend, Vance Henry, who has been involved in our city as well for many, many years, faithful liaison, City of Chicago, in the mayor's office. Our next session is going to move us into working with people of peace around you. There's a number of guests with Vance as well. Just want you to know again, brother, how we love and are deeply grateful for you. And we've prayed Vance along through when I first got to know you, Mayor Daley, Mayor Emanuel, Mayor Lightfoot, and for whatever's next. So Vance, come lead us and bring your guests up as well. And we're going to, this next session now, working with people of peace right around you. All right.
Let me take this occasion just to thank Dr. Feuder and this wonderful team. Let's give it up for our team. I say team because if I start calling names, I may miss somebody and I may not be asked to come back. But it's just a wonderful day to be alive. It's a wonderful day to be with my brothers and sisters in Christ. That's not always the case, given that I work at City Hall. But it's a great day for me to be here. It's an extraordinary day for us to be talking about what the church can do to impact, change, and transform the city of Chicago. If you did not know that, that's just not the responsibility of government. And Commander, while we appreciate your presence, I'm of the mind, Pastor Allen, that the work of transforming and changing and redeeming, somebody used that word in their first comments, of redeeming this world and our city, is the work and the mission of the church. Amen. Now, if I was at my home church, Mount Vernon Baptist Church, somebody would say amen.
Bring it home, preacher.
This is really extraordinary, and I want to say a death thanks to Dr. Kong, who's, let's give it up to Dr. Kong. As he was talking about Tobe in the crib, I looked up there, and some of us who got up early was looking like we want to slide inside the crib. Dr. Kong, thank you so much. If you love God today, why don't you put those hands together? I do that because the Bible, some of you Bible readers know that the scripture says that God inhabits the praises of his people. And it's just good for us to be here and to have God join us. I think what Dr. Kong talked about, it's fitting and appropriate that we use the word extraordinary. That God, Elohim God, God eternal, would invite us to be his partners, to be his eyes and ears, to in fact participate with him in the building of kingdom community. Dr. Feuder used the word that Dr. King would often talk about in the beloved community. I don't know how you feel about it, but see, I know my background. That God would ask me to do anything, to participate with him, to bring his kingdom to earth. And in fact, when Jesus was asked to teach his disciples to pray, he used the language of thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That God would invite us to literally participate, be his hands, his eyes, and to actually, Paul uses the word workmanship, right?
Yes, sir.
To work with God, to bring the kingdom to earth is pretty extraordinary. I say that, and I want to take a little liberty, Dr. Kong, based upon what you said. I was assigned by Mayor Daley following the tragic events of 9/11 to actually go to New York City and participate in a conference about doing exactly what we're talking about. Interesting enough, and I'll cut across the field here because I know I have limited time and I'm a Baptist preacher.
Here we go. Here we go. Look out. Come on.
Another Baptist preacher who's keeping time. But I'll cut across the field here and try to make this poignant to us. Mayor Daley told me to go to New York and be a part of this conference on how cities, how faith communities, how regular citizens can be partner together to make their cities better places. And interesting enough, following the events of 9/11, no one showed up from the cities across our city. I was one of 3 people who literally showed up at a conference where people from major cities were supposed to be there to talk about this nationwide grassroots effort to change and transform urban cities. And I was sitting next to, we were going actually down to ground zero. We had been put on in these white kind of hazmat suits, and we were headed down to ground zero. And I was sitting next to the commissioner from the Department of Housing of New York City, who had just been in an architectural conference here in Chicago. And she went on and on about Chicago. She talked about how wonderful our nightlife was. I guess she had gone to church. She was a person of faith. And she talked about some Gothic church that she had been at. She talked about the academic institution of Chicago. She had, I guess, came up Lakeshore Drive, and she talked about how wonderful Lakeshore Drive was. She went on and on about how wonderful Chicago was. I couldn't get in a word in edgewise. And I said, yeah, all of those things are wonderful about Chicago. I said, but Commissioner, you know what's great about Chicago? And all of those things are great. The architecture, academic institutions, the nightlife, Lakeshore Drive, the museum campus. I said, but you know what makes Chicago great? The people of Chicago.
Amen.
Some of you know that you grew up in Sunday school like me and Chris and others, and you remember that this is the church.
Oh, yeah.
Come on, let's do it together.
Yeah, here we go.
This is the church. This is the steeple. Open the doors. And here's all the people.
That's it.
That's really what Dr. Kong was talking about. That's really what Dr. King was talking about in the beloved community. The church is the ecclesia. It's the people of God. People, us.
Amen.
And I want to argue today, and Chris mentioned this as we were sitting at the table earlier. Here's a question for us in terms of the relevance of the church. We know that God's institution for change and transformation is the church.
That's right.
Here's the question for us today. If our church was taken up off the corner in which it sits,
There you go.
would people even miss us?
That's right.
Would they miss us? Do we have that kind of theology of place, that kind of, if I can use a word, in fact, hunch your neighbor and say presence. Do we have the kind of presence in our neighborhoods that are relevant? Couple other comments. I want to argue, and the reason why I said this is extraordinary today, the civil rights movement started in a room, a church basement just like this down in Montgomery, Alabama. And I don't even know if they had this many people, Reverend Allen. But the civil rights movement, and it started because a group of people got angry and frustrated about the circumstances, the conditions in which they were living, and they got uncomfortable enough to be willing to connect, which is what I want to talk about in the moments that I have as I wrap up. They got uncomfortable enough to connect where what was given birth to in terms of the civil rights movement happened as a result of a lady named Rosa Parks who got tired of sitting in the back of the bus. And when she stood up, the world stood up with her.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
When she stood up, the world stood up with her.
Yes.
Which is why we know about her today. For a little bit, I want to talk about the power of connections. And I want to read a passage of scripture in your hearing that's profound and makes this point. And this is in Ecclesiastes 4. And it reads in this way. 2 are better than one because they have a good return for their labor. If either of them falls down, one can help the other up. But pity anyone who falls and has no one to help them up. Also, if 2 lie down together, they will keep warm. But how can one keep warm alone? Though one may be overpowered, 2 can defend themselves. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken.
Yes.
Hunch your neighbor and hunch your neighbor. Look, in fact, turn to your neighbor. Make me feel at home today. Turn to your neighbor, look him in the face, eyeball to eyeball contact.
It's getting a little awkward here, Ben.
And let me just say this. Let me say this for those of you concerned. We are as people of faith. We are under Psalms 91. We don't have to worry about pestilence and coronavirus.
All right.
Amen. We have that kind of cover.
Okay.
Look your neighbor in the face and say, there's power in connection. There's power in connection. Several years ago, I was coming back from Alabama, Pastor Allen, and I got stuck with Fred Coffey in the Birmingham airport.
Lord have mercy.
And I wish I had time to unpack this, but I'll just say this. A dear friend of mine was stuck in Birmingham, and we were trying to get back to Chicago because I had to actually preach the next day. And I was a little nervous that I wasn't going to make it back. And when I went up to the ticket counter, I said, "Man, what's the problem? I don't get it. It's snowing in Chicago. It always snows in Chicago." And if I had time, I would unpack this. But let me just say this: what captured me was when she said, "But Mr. Henry, yes, it's snowing in Chicago, and I know it always snows in Chicago, but it's the kind of snow that's sticky." Oh, if I had time.
Yes, sir.
If I had time.
Yes, sir.
I said, "Ma'am, that's what happens in Chicago. Snow sticks." And she says, no. But the Tabernacle is covered at O'Hare, and there's no way that we can get a flight from Birmingham into Chicago because, Mr. Henry, it's the kind of snow that's sticking to the Tabernacle.
Preach.
And we can't get any planes into Chicago. I said, it's the busiest airport in the world. How can, she said, Mr. Henry, it's because it's the kind of snow that's sticking together. If snowflakes, fragile snowflakes, can shut down the busiest airport in the world, I just want to raise a question here today.
Yes, sir.
What would happen if today we decided to
Preach.
Right. Yeah.
I would argue that what starts here, up here, we're in Edgewater,
Yes, sir.
up in Edgewater, Andersonville would go to Edgewater, to Ravenswood, to Uptown.
Yeah.
It would start to trickle over into Inglewood and Lawndale and Garfield and Austin and Roseland.
Yep.
Yes.
And a commander who is here today,
Yeah.
who is a part of the Chicago Police Department, whose task it is, at least we say that, it's their task because we're taxpayers, it's their responsibility to make Chicago safe. It's their responsibility because we pay our taxes. I would argue that they would find something that's as powerful in their arsenal as the bullets and the guns that they use in the power of God. And when we as people of God decide to...
Stick.
Somebody, if I had time,
I want to lift this up again, Chris.
we've seen it. The first year we did this,
Yeah.
and I want to be careful here because this may be tweeted, this may be Vine, this may be social media, but the then leaders of our city had to say to me after they poo-pooed this kind of outreach that literally somebody had done statistics, and I argue their assignment was to do it, and I hope, Commander, you don't share this, but I think their assignment was to do it to say this why we shouldn't be working with them. Interesting enough, the weekend we did this,
Yes.
there was no homicide.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Yeah. All right. There we go.
In Chicago, I didn't say New York, I didn't say LA. In Chicago, the weekend we did this, the first weekend, there was not one homicide in Chicago. Because we decided to what?
Yeah.
I want to argue today that this is the strategy. And Commander, God bless you. I meet with the superintendent regularly, and the police department is poised to do some pretty extraordinary things with technology and a lot of other strategies and techniques. But what would happen if they and us decided to, in a real deliberate, intentional way, to come together in ways that we've never come together before. And churches on corners decided to just take the street north, south, east, and west, and to act as though God lived there.
Amen.
And to start making Jesus' prayer
Amen.
our business.
That's right.
Amen.
Bring it.
So how we doing? I'm at 6 minutes. What I want to do is invite up a person, a dear friend. She's a person of faith. In fact, the good news today, she attends one of our partner churches in Progressive Baptist Church with Pastor Charlie Dates, who many of you know. He's very much a friend to us, very much a part of this effort. I want to talk about not just when we get together, but let's just assume that we got together. And then we got together with the blocks around our houses of worship and got connected with them and got connected to city resources and services. So we can begin to help the police department out with what we call the broken windows concept, which is to start to address violence before it even happens. So when there's a graffiti on a building, or there's an abandoned building, or the lights out on the street, if we can connect with amongst ourselves and then connect with the city services that Audrey is a part of, could you imagine the facelift? Could you imagine the quality of life that would go up in our city?
Amen.
By just connecting with the resources of the city to address the issues so that the commander and the police don't have to address them. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yes, sir.
And so today I want to ask Audrey to come. I've known her for years. Just a wonderful person of faith. You need to know that there are people of faith in government.
Amen.
And Audrey represents her faith well. She's a wonderful manager, professional, and I want you to give her a warm welcome as she comes to talk about city service.
Good morning, everyone. I'm going to say, Vance, you just gave my presentation. I am delighted to be here this morning. Again, my name is Audrey Mathis, and I am the director of 311 for the city of Chicago. And as Vance indicated, I am saved. I love the Lord because he heard my cry. And more than anything, he saved my soul. But I, as Vance had indicated, I have been in city government, oh my God, right out of college. And I've known Vance about that long. And I have a passion also about what, and first of all, I enjoyed Reverend Khan so much, immensely. But he really talked about things that we should be mindful of, is that we want peace. Don't we all want peace?
Amen.
We really want, first of all, we want inner peace. And then we want peace in our homes. But it extends beyond our homes, our individual homes. We ought to want peace in our neighborhoods, on our blocks. It starts on your block. So it starts with you, then in your home, then on your block, then in your neighborhood, and the community, the city, the state, federal. That's how it should be, those building blocks. And so, as Vance mentioned, it's so important that we, the church, or we that are part of community, understand that we have a role in making sure that we address the quality of life in our neighborhoods. When you look at, in your home, if you have a broken window inside your home, you're gonna go get it fixed, right? Because you wouldn't stand for it being in your home on a broken window. I'm sure, Minister Khan, when that bullet came, you had that window fixed.
Yep.
You couldn't be in the home without it fixed. Well, the same thing has to happen in our neighborhoods. When you see a pothole, when you see lights out, when you see different trees that need to be trimmed, and a lot of people say, well, you know, the city of Chicago knows about those things. No, the city doesn't have something where they're sitting down at City Hall and they can see when the lights go here. Although with the new smart lighting, they're working in that direction so that it'll be automatic, they can see that. But that's lighting. But other things, they don't know that they exist. The only way they know that it exists is because of you, because of us. We have to inform the city. And so about Mayor Daley, I started also under Mayor Daley's administration, and he started 311 years ago, back in 1999. We were actually one of the first 311 cities, 311 to incorporate in the nation. Baltimore and ours, we were around the same time. And the mayor had a good vision of saying that because we want to make sure that we take part in the process, we need to have an avenue to be able to report that information. So our 311 system went, fortunately, under a renovation in 2018. We had not had a major renovation in a number of years because we wanted a better way of having people be able to communicate with us, not just by calling our office. We're 24/7, you can call us at any time, but millions of people are in Chicago, and we can only handle so many calls. So what we did is we wanted to make sure we equipped people with an avenue to be able to get that. So how many in here have a phone, mobile phone? Almost everybody. There it is. So what we did was we wanted to make sure that we built our own app. We have our own unique app. It's called Shy 311. I would encourage everybody when they leave here today or now to just go to the Apple Store and or Google Play. For those who like Android, I'm an Apple person, but either way, download that. And by downloading that, you're now saying, I'm taking responsibility for my neighborhood. Yeah. And what we're looking for is we need ambassadors. Yeah. Ambassadors, not just individually, I'm concerned about my home. We need ambassadors that's concerned about their neighborhoods, their blocks. And so I would employ everyone that's here today, because I don't have a lot of time, I would employ everyone to as many as possible that would be willing to sign up as ambassadors with us, and that we will work with you. It's really simple, but if you need some additional training on how to use it, I would encourage you to do that and start reporting those things. You can take photos of it, you can take pictures of it, or if you don't want to do it on your mobile phone, you can go online to 311.chicago.gov and download that and start doing that. Become a partner with us to be able to affect that change in community, to have a tove, as he mentioned, because it all starts with us. And when we care, then our neighbors care, and then our city begin to care, and then we can make a difference in the neighborhoods by which we live in. Amen. And we work, and we also go to church and etc. So with that, I just wanted to do that. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I really was blessed, and I'm glad I came. Thank you. So, thank you. And we have our vendor here. We hired a marketing team, the William Everett Group, that's been going around in all neighborhoods doing this for us. So our table is in the back. We would encourage you for information, but also sign up with us to become an ambassador. Okay? Thank you, and God bless.
Thank you, Audrey. All right, guys, the big idea of this session, as you can see on your schedule, is working with people of peace right around you. And I'm grateful for the many that are doing so right up here on the northeast side of our city. And so, along with Scott Parker, who's going to help shape this, there's a number of individuals coming up, and I'll have Scott go ahead and introduce him. Scott is a part of Rogers Park, our community church's Rogers Park team that is present in several different locations. And so, guys, too, you also probably see the time and look on the schedule. If we may, we're going to kind of spill into some of our break time in order to keep us on schedule. Please know that coffee, refreshments, restrooms, help yourself, so to speak. But I think in order to do this and maintain a sense of commitment to the other themes that will follow, we may spill into that break, and apologies in advance. Scotty, lead us.
All right, so if
You can pull that out.
Bishop Nelson, if you come up, Commander, would you join us up here? Scott Manke, Jason Lalonde, you guys can come up here just real quick. So what this is supposed to be about is just kind of learning from some folks up here on the north side who are engaging with other stakeholders in the community, not just church folk, but and so these guys are definitely doing that. just personally something we've started doing in our neighborhood, the North of Howard neighborhood. We've got 4 or 5 not-for-profits up there. We're kind of one of the more low-income areas in Rogers Park. We do a community tour once a month where we invite the church to come and tour all the different organizations in our neighborhood. Stop in, and I tell each organization, you get 10 minutes, tell us what you do, and tell us your biggest financial need and volunteer need, just as a way to get more church folk involved in our community. So I'm just gonna, we don't have much time. We'll go down the line and maybe just talk about who you are and, oh, it's working now, and how you connected with community stakeholders, and maybe just like a quick benefit that you've seen because of that. So.
Hey, good morning, everybody. Jason Lalonde, Park Community Church. We have 4 churches up here in the far north side of Chicago that we all kind of do life together. Where's Vance? There he is. So good.
Sticky snow.
Sticky snow up here in the far northeast side. One of the great learns that we've had, we've been up here for 7 years, but one of the stakeholders, were the very first people we met when we did our community analysis of the neighborhood. We spent 1.5 years of just getting to know people, churches, ministries, all in Rogers Park. Was a brother by the name of James Crockett, who was a part of our North Rogers Park location along with Scott. And James, and I'll just leave it at this, he introduced us to dependence. James was part of leading a Bible study for a lot of gang members, and through a 4.5-year period of that Bible study, lost 8 men. And so for a white boy from Lansing, Michigan, moving to Chicago, and then being kind of put into this context, so to speak, what some I was familiar with, others not so much, the depth of violence. What it did is James taught us, and is still teaching us in many ways, of what it means to be dependent, because I had no idea what to do. How do you do a gang funeral? And all those type of things. How do you help come alongside others in our church in our North Rogers Park when Scott would come to church on Sunday mornings and the yellow tape is up because somebody's been shot, and people coming to church around the yellow tape. So all just like, God, I don't know what to do. And I'll just leave you with this. I'm thankful for that gift.
Yeah.
Because in Mark chapter, we'll just say in Mark, it's in Matthew 2.
We try so hard at Moody to teach him. I'm messing with you, bro.
That's right, Doc. In the Gospel.
In the gospel, yeah, there, in the Bible. The Bible says. You're good, bro. You're good.
Jesus said, unless you receive the kingdom like a little child, you cannot enter it. And so often when we come into the kingdom, we're in complete dependence, knowing that we cannot save ourselves. It's only what God can do. But often after we come to faith in Christ and we're in the incredible kingdom, doing kingdom works, we then all of a sudden don't become little children. We act like that is just past. And that we can't. That's still not a requirement or a necessity to do kingdom work. And so I'm thankful for the gift of James Crockett, many others who continue to teach me, teach us as a church and our 4 respective churches what it means to be dependent, what it means to be a child.
Good stuff, Jay.
Amen.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Brendan McCrudden. I'm the sort of new commander here in the 20th District. I've only been here for a few months, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you all for traveling far and wide. I know some people came from quite a distance for this, so thanks very much. I appreciate that. I was born and raised in Chicago, and I've lived on 4 streets in the city of Chicago. On 2 of those streets, someone has been shot to death. Now that might sound terrible to some folks, but living in the city of Chicago, that can be just 1 week on some streets on the south and west side, and town used to be included in that sort of area as well too. Now, those streets I lived on when someone was shot to death, nothing really happened after that. It was just an incident that happened, and everybody sort of moved on. So seeing how now places of faith and worship are coming together to try and say, hey, we want to come out and show a presence on these streets. We want to come out and connect with people. We want to come out and try to make a difference, not just to reassure the folks that live on the street, but to reach out to the ones who are involved in the violence. And one of the things that Pastor Allen and many other people in this room have done in the past and continue to do is to reach out to people who are in a gang lifestyle, who are trapped in that lifestyle, who are a part of it, and to try and show them there is another way. And one thing the city does is called custom notifications, where there's people from the community, from faith organizations, from the police department, where we reach out to people in these gang violence, people we think are have been involved in shootings or maybe targets of shootings. Maybe they've been shot recently. And we know there's sometimes these gang members have been shot numerous times, and we say there's another way. There is a chance to change your way. There's city services, there's jobs, there's counseling, there's education. There's a lot of programs like that. So seeing this really moving forward is fantastic. Going out with positive loitering, where churches will go out on the hot spots, what we call them, where there's gang violence, and trying to work together and showing the good people that are there, who have always been good, that there is support and strength there, but also some of these folks who may be on the wrong path, there is a way to change that path. And I spoke to Pastor Allen recently about this. Just one person that changes has such a ripple effect. One person that says, I was in this lifestyle, I've changed, and now they're a family person, they have a job, they're a positive influence. Many of the people that come out on these custom notifications are former gang members, people who are in this lifestyle and say, I am from where you're from, I know exactly what you went through, and I was able to change, and that's living proof, and that makes a difference. So thank you guys for all that you're doing, I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Commander.
Scott Manke, Family Empowerment Centers. My wife and I moved into the neighborhood about 18 years ago, and I'm a pretty simple theologian. Love God, love your neighbor, carry out the Great Commission. Right? If we can do that well, then we're going to see change in our communities. The problem is we don't really foster that relationship with God very well. We tend to want to relate to God on our terms, not His terms, and then because we don't receive God's love for us, understand His love for people, we don't really love our neighbors well, when really it's about walking and doing life with them. You know, I just had one of the things that we do is we host groups from around the nation who come to Chicago to be on mission. And we both serve them and they serve us in our communities. But one of the things I tell them midweek during a foot washing service that we do with them is, hey, how can we love the people outside the walls of the church when we can't love each other inside the church? You know, look across this room and, you know, we're all sitting together, but do we love one another? Amen. And we really have to learn how to love one another. If we can love God, love our neighbors well, then going out into our community is not that hard to do because we have the framework and the mindset and the vision to see people the way God sees them. And you know what? All people matter to God. And so, you know, we've done lots of things to partner with our community. We send people around the city when we have teams to come in to serve the churches around the city, to help people in need. We do a lot in our context to sort of to say, hey, you know what? It doesn't really matter what these four walls look like. What matters is how we live outside these four walls. Right. And there was a quick story. There was a situation that happened in our community where we have homeless / semi-homeless. You know, a lot of the homeless are semi-homeless. They choose to be out on the street even though they have a place to go, right? Because they like to drink, they like to do, you know, what they do, they like to hang out. And we had a group of guys that would hang out in our community. We've known them for 15 years, ever since I've been in the neighborhood. About 3 years ago, in the alley, they're best friends, right? They start drinking, and guess what happens? They start fighting with one another, and one guy stabs another guy. Well, all the neighbors on the backside of our building who have $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 homes, they're upset because these guys are fighting in the alley. What do? They call the alderman, they call the police commander and say, hey, you need to do something about this. So we were invited. They said, hey, can you guys help us? Of course we can help you. We pull in the guys from the community who are the homeless guys because they trust us. There's officials from the city there. And in the context of that meeting, the police commander says, hey, we want you to stop feeding these guys. And I didn't say anything in the meeting. That wasn't him. But after the meeting, I went up to him and I said, listen, Commander, I said, I can't not feed these guys. Because the scriptures tell me, and this is my authority, that if somebody comes to me with a need, and I have the ability to meet that, I need to meet that need. Now we'll partner, and we kind of laid into these guys, and we exerted our authority with these guys in the community. But I think there's a way for us to find paths to work together, even when our theology or our philosophy doesn't always align. You know, I think we can find win-win situations in our community. One of those guys is now 6 months sober. Is now 6 months sober after 15 years of watching him struggle. Sit in my church service and during communion fall asleep and fall off the chair right in the middle of church service in the front row. And you know what our church did? They ignored the fact that he fell on the ground. They continued with communion. They picked him up afterwards, loved on him, and continued to love on him even after that. And so that's kind of how we live out life in our community context. Love God, love our neighbors, go out and be with people, live it out, practice it, make disciples, introduce them to Jesus, and live together as family.
Amen.
That's all powerful. I can't even top any of this, but I'll do my best. I'm Bishop Nelson, Northside Tabernacle of Praise, and I'm brought into this, and I'm wondering, Scott, where you've been all this time. I needed to be a part of this. We are big on partnering. You know, as the guys were talking, I'm sitting here thinking to myself, oh, okay, this thought came to me. If our greatest work is done behind the pulpit, we really haven't represented God very well. And I'm thinking about my church, and I know I drive my church really crazy because I've said to them repeatedly, listen, you can't just show up on Sunday morning and be fed and go home and come again and be fed. We got to make a difference. Yes. And so we have discovered in our community the best way to do that is in partnership. So with Scott, with the police department, we do that very well. We host many programs. I've been invited to speak to youth representing God, which is what I do. And we have done things that's not so Christian norm. And folks have said that's, and let me stop there. I don't want to go too far with that, but we believe in just loving people as a brother said, the way God loved them. We've discovered that one of the biggest issues that we have come against is the labels on churches, the title, you know, your churches versus mine, and we all are proud of whether it's a denomination or whatever it is, and that's great. But that very thing that we exalt so highly has become the one thing that caused such great separation among the churches. I'm sitting here with my brothers, and I know you said what church you all belong to, but I forgot. You know why? Because it's not that important to me. I don't want to know you because of the church you go to. I want to know you because of the God you serve. And if we can come together and break down all of those walls that separated us and realize that we have the same mission, and the mission is to change the world. Jesus told us clearly by his commission, go and make disciples of all nations. He didn't actually say what church they need to go to because there's only one church. And if we can join hands together, and I like that, stick together and work for the kingdom, we can do so much better. We are all bothered by the fact of the violence and the crime. And we have our sanctuary, we go home and we turn our TV on and we relax. And we wait for the next thing to happen and then we're aroused by it. But we ought to be so mad about all of this that we just, get together, stick together and create an army and fight against the devil, because ultimately he's the one that we're fighting against. And I believe that we have to look for solution in the church because the church has been commissioned to change the world. We just started something we have not even launched it yet. I told Scott about it a little bit, but there were a black girl, a black barber, and a black preacher got together. And we decided, number one, what we can't change is the fact that we're all black. And please understand, it's not a racist comment. We understand the black community and what happens in our community. We can talk about it, we can ignore it, but the reality, we got to do something about it. So we decided with a black girl and a black barber and a black preacher, let's see what we can do. So we decided to start a mentoring program that will be launched in April 20th. Before the program was launched, we have 11 black boys that's already signed up. So what we're trying to do is not just to talk about the problem, but become a part of the solution to the problem. And I believe that this is where it begins. This is where it begins, guys. This is where it begins. I want to be a part of that, and we all are here because that's what we want to do, be a part of the great solution. I could go on and talk about all the wonderful things we're doing, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. Our lives been changed. I want to be a part of that change. I want to partner with you and you and you and you and all of us stick together. If we stick together, we'll shut the devil planes down.
Amen.
Right.
Amen, Bishop.
Yeah, so I just encourage you to talk to these guys. Jason's also, his church is heavily involved with 2 or 3 schools, really made a difference there. I know Bishop is a faith liaison for our police, 24th police district, so works with the Muslim community, Jewish community in our neighborhood. Great resources. Scott's been where he's been forever. Just that's what this is about, is connecting with one another, to learn from one another. That's why we're doing this for 3 months. We want you to come to the south side with us. We want you to come to the west side with us so we can learn from them. I'll tell one real quick story that about cross-pollination. So we pray every Thursday morning, a citywide prayer, 5 a.m., so that we can be done by 6:30 and beat traffic wherever you come from, in Lawndale, which is very close to the center of our city, actually. And there was a shooting, I think a couple years ago, where there were so many people shot that they had to take them to a different emergency room. Like, the emergency room was overwhelmed, and we were discussing that with Pastor Phil from the West Side. And just earlier that week, in my prayer time, I had read Deuteronomy 21. It said, if you find a body in a field, you have to bring the elders from the local town to where that body is. And they have to say to God, we don't know who killed this person. And in that theology is also, he also didn't show up at our town and we kicked him out, sent him out into the field and didn't take care of him, and that's why he was killed. That's part of what's being said there. And during that prayer meeting, that verse landed on us like a ton of bricks. It was like, what would happen if whatever was the closest church showed up where the shooting was and took responsibility for it? There was a pastor that I had met on the south side of Chicago videotaping their Peace Corner, who I had invited to that meeting. It was the only time he ever came. And he changed his sermon that Sunday, preached out of that passage, sent me the sermon. We played that sermon at our church the next Sunday. And I said, I don't know what to do with this. God's asking us a question. I don't know what to do with this. 3 days later, a guy named Shane was shot and killed. He had just landed from San Francisco, was standing on a corner. A stray bullet hit him. Northwestern grad student was killed 3 blocks from our church. And God just put conviction on me. And I emailed every pastor on the north side. And we've started something called Response to Murder. We show up at every site where there's a murder. I say that to say, look what happened. South side, west side, north side, learned together. Donovan comes to almost every one of our events. Pastor Laws came up to that first one from Roseland, right? That's the church being sticky,
Yes,
right?
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir.
Right? And so we want to encourage you to keep with this journey. We're going to be April and May.
Yeah.
And who you might meet, South Side, West Side,
Yeah, that's good.
might have a strategy that's
Good.
going to make an impact in your community.
Well said, Scott.
So,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you. Thank you all.